Here to discuss this and more, Danya Perry, former Deputy Attorney General for the State of New York and Chief of Investigations for the Moreland Commission to investigate public corruption, and Suzanne Craig, New York Times investigative reporter, also an MSNBC contributor. It's great to have both of you with us. Danya, I'll start with you. Your reaction to Trump's decision not to testify. Are you shocked he seems to have finally taken the advice of his lawyers and not take the stand?
I am shocked he's finally taking the advice of his lawyers. I'm not shocked in this case that he is not testifying. It would have been a legally terrible idea for him to do so. And there's also a long history, a pattern and practice, if you will, of him failing to appear when he's said up and down that he will. This just happened in a case where I represent Michael Cohen, an affirmative $500 million case that Mr. Trump brought against my client, where he delayed producing discovery and appearing for deposition. And then on the eve of the deposition that had been court ordered, he simply voluntarily dismissed the case. So I didn't think he was going to subject himself to cross-examination, which he really didn't the first time around in his trial testimony. And also tempt fate by somehow running afoul of the gag order that is still in place against him. So I was not shocked at all, and it I think was the right call for him at this time.
Suzanne, your thoughts on this? I mean, does this decision surprise you? You were actually inside the courtroom the last time the ex-president took the stand, so you had a first-hand account of seeing how he performs on the witness stand, and I guess you know better than most whether or not he would have been able to pull this off tomorrow without any major hiccups.
Yeah, I don't think there was much to be gained by this. This judge, to be Captain Obvious here, does not like him. He is already found against him on summary judgment and found him liable of this. They're just haggling over damages. And that day in court was very contentious, and the judge was fed up with him. And then you've got now looking, right towards the end of the trial, you sort of started to feel this maybe wasn't going to happen, that he wasn't going to show up tomorrow, when Eric Trump decided not to testify with, with counsel from his lawyers. They don't really need to put they didn't need to put Eric on, and they didn't need, I don't think, tomorrow to put Donald Trump on. One of the reasons we felt that they may come and they put Don Jr. on was to get certain evidence in, and that just isn't the case this time. I think he could only have done himself more damage by showing up tomorrow, just given his performance the first time. We know from that, and just from a history of him testifying and giving depositions, that are usually very testy. And I just don't see any point in for him in continuing to upset this judge.
Danya, I wanted to ask you about the other ruling in this case. On Thursday, you had a panel of state appellate division judges pause Judge Engoron's pretrial order dissolving some of Trump's businesses as a result of his finding that he and his company had, in fact, engaged in persistent fraud. Trump has celebrated this decision as a win, but can you walk us through what this actually means for the ex-president and his businesses in practice? Is it a win?
Well, for Mr. Trump, delay is usually a win. That is his MO, and he's done it successfully for many, many years. So here, the fate of his business will live to perhaps die another day. It is simply a stay, as you say. It just means that the execution of the punishment will not be immediate. And that is not surprising. This corporate death penalty that the judge had ordered is quite unusual. And so I think the appellate division wanted to give it some time, see how the trial pans out, see what the evidence shows, and decide in a more measured fashion. So not a surprise, again, highly unusual for these business certifications to be pulled. And I think it really is just a wait and see kind of an approach.
Suzanne, let me ask you about another defense witness who testified in court last week, Eli Bartoff, an accounting professor at New York University. It was interesting because we later learned that the former president's political action committee paid for a portion of his fees. And while it's not unusual for a defendant in a trial to pay expert witness fees, what does the use of campaign funds possibly signal about Trump's finances here?
Well, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I just found that fascinating. And you're seeing it not only in this forum, but you're seeing his PAC in other instances pay legal fees. And it really does go to the idea that, at least in part, Donald Trump seems to be running in order to raise money to pay for all of these legal proceedings. It was quite the numbers that were involved with that expert who has still got potentially some time left on the stand. We're looking upward of $1 million, of which some of that was being paid by his PAC. I think it's good that we found that out, and it's important to amplify it, because this is not the Trump organization solely picking up these bills. It's very much, you see it's a political proceeding by the political rhetoric that's going on, and in fact, it's being paid for by political money that's coming in.
Danya, the defense's only other remaining witness is Bartov, whose cross-examination will resume Tuesday. And then, as I mentioned, the trial is scheduled to go on break until January 11th for the holidays. Talk us through what we could expect to see once the court goes back into session. How close are we to actually getting a ruling from Judge Engoron here?
So it sounds like the cross-examination will happen on Tuesday of the accounting expert. And as we understand it, that's the last defense witness. The prosecution has the opportunity to put on a rebuttal case. We'll see if they do. And then there'll be closing statements. And the judge has said, and that could happen as early as this week or next, and the judge has said that he expects that he will rule by the end of January. So it's not as immediate as a jury verdict, of course, but it's pretty soon. It's certainly well in advance of any of the other trials that are coming up in the spring and on.
Suzanne, you've been following Trump for decades. You probably know his finances better than anyone. A few moments ago, I laid out just some of what he risks losing come judgment. How do you think that's weighing in on the ex-president? Is he scared? And how important is, we've all gotten to learn Trump before his presidency as Trump, the real estate magnate of New York. These were his crown jewels, if you will. And to see these crown jewels potentially stripped away from him, what, if anything, will they do to the psychology of this man?
I think we've seen it played out. I think so many people have been surprised at just how rattled he is by this. I have to say, having studied his finances now for years, this is really his essence. When you talk about his money, it's the language that he speaks, and this is a lot of money at stake, and it's the inheritance of his children and his grandchildren. This is a big deal, and he stands to lose hundreds of millions of dollars. This fine, people are talking if it comes in around $250 million. That is big money. You think about having the fact he's probably going to have to sell assets to meet that tab. And I think about it just in terms of one asset. He sold in Washington, D.C., a hotel, the old post office hotel, that his family had rehabbed. It was sort of the last project that they did going into the White House, and they sold that. Just from that, he got, I think it was about $130 million. And that's not a profit. They put a lot of money into that, but that was the distribution that he got from that. Just to give you an idea that probably their best asset, which was sold, that's what he got from it. They're going to have to come up with a lot of money. We don't know what he's gotten from the Live Golf tournament and some of the other things he's done post-presidency, but that's a lot of money for anyone to come up with, and that fine penalty when it comes will not be tax deductible. So it's a significant deal for him, and also just his inability to do business in New York City. This is a boy from Queens, and he made his name in New York. He owns not insignificant assets here, and he's going to be run out of town.
Yeah, and a very important point about that post office building converted into a hotel. It became the subject of a lot of scrutiny when people started realizing that foreign governments were paying to stay at that hotel, and people were looking as to whether or not it was a way to get favor with the sitting president and his family at the time. Danya Perry and Suzanne Craig, thank you so much to the both of you. Greatly appreciate your time and insights this evening.